Okay, we're still in the same section here, factoring by grouping. So now we're sort of doing the same thing, right? We're looking for common factors. So in the polynomial has 4 terms, we can factor by grouping. So you group the first 2 and the last 2, and each group's GCF. It's usually easier to actually do it than to kind of tell you how to do it. So let me just show you. So look at each term. Remember the term separated by plus or minus. So we're going to look at, here's our first term we're looking at. Here's the next one. So what is common in both those terms? It's actually this binomial factor, the 4x minus 1. So what am I going to do? Well, I can factor that out, 4x minus 1. And then what's left? Well, when I remove a 4x minus 1 from that first term, all I'm left with is an x squared. When I remove it from this second term, all I'm left with is a minus 6. And that's it. Now we could check this. You could distribute through this x squared on this top one to get a nice, because here it's kind of pre-factored for you in this first one. And then FOIL this one out. I'm not going to do that for this one. Okay, but this one here, ax plus ay plus bx plus by. Well, nothing's grouped here. So if nothing's already grouped, and I'll be honest, they're not usually going to be grouped. This first one, they did it for you. This is kind of what we're looking for, a common element. We're going to go ahead and put parentheses around these. And then within each group, you're going to pull out a common factor if there is one. If there's not one, you can sometimes rearrange and get one. But if you look at this first group, what is common in both ax and ay? Good, an a. I can pull out an a, and then what am I left with? X plus y plus, now what's common in this next grouping? Good, a b. Pull out a b, and what am I left with? X plus y. Now what do we notice here? We notice we have a common binomial factor of x plus y. I can pull that out. When I pull out x plus y, what am I left with? This first term, I'm just left with an a, because that x plus y goes away. Next term, I'm just left with a b. Now, we can go ahead and check this. So here's the final answer. Now, to check that, we can use what we learned in the last unit. Multiply x times a, and we'll get ax. Then x times b, get bx. Y times a, we'll get ay. And then y times b, we'll get by. Notice it's exactly the same thing here. The order, remember, addition is commutative. I can write these in any order. And so if I write my terms with the a in it side by side, in terms of the b in it side by side, I have ax plus ay plus bx plus by. I get exactly the same thing. Okay, let's look at this one. Factor 4x cubed minus 6x squared minus 8x squared plus 12x. So one thing we should always do before we begin to factor through grouping or other techniques that we'll learn in this unit is to first pull out a common factor if there is one. So do we have any common factors here? I sure do. I can pull out a common factor of 2 goes into all those, and so does an x. So if I pull out a 2 and then an x, what am I left with? I'm left with 2x squared minus 3x minus, let's see, 2 goes into 8, 4 times 4x plus 6. Now you may be thinking, why don't I just combine these two right here? Well, for this purposes, we're only factoring by grouping the 4 termed polynomials, and you'll sort of see why in the next section, I believe. Okay, so with that said, now I look within here and do my grouping. So let's go ahead and group up this guy right here. And then again, we have to be careful. We're sliding that parentheses in, so I've got to change that sign to compensate, because if I just put a parenthesis in there, all of a sudden I've changed what the values of these are, right? So I've got to be careful. Negative is positive, so I'll get back the original expression, which is what I had to have happen. Okay, with that said, pull your 2x out. Don't forget this guy. Okay, that was our first step. Now, what's my common factor in this group? Well, I've got an x I can pull out. I'm just going to go and put my parentheses here. That's that parentheses. And then I'm going to x. And then what is left in here? I've got a 2x minus 3. Okay, minus what's common in these terms right here? Well, I can pull out a 2. I'll pull out a 2, and what am I left with? 2x minus 3. Make sure you follow that. And again, try to redistribute mentally. Let's redistribute this. X times 2x is 2x squared. X times minus 3 is 3x. Sometimes that helps sort of reinforce why we did just work. 2 times 2x is 4x. Negative 2 times a negative 3 gave me that positive value there. Okay, so what do I have left to do? Well, I've got my grouping here. Here's my common factor. 2x minus 3, 2x minus 3. So bring down this 2x. Now I'm going to factor out that 2x minus 3 from each group. And then what do I have left in this first group? Well, I'm just left with an x. The second group, I'm just left with the minus 2. This is definitely one of the harder ones that we would do when we pull out a GCF first, and we had a negative one we had to compensate for. Now, when you put your parentheses in, and if you see your factors are off by a sign, it's worth a second look. Did I forget to compensate my values there? When I slid the parentheses in there, I changed the sign of that number. So I had to roll it back, I had to change that sign. So I know that was a hard one. Hang with me for these next few examples. Okay, 3x squared minus 3x cubed minus 2x squared minus 9x plus 6. Okay, so remember I first look, do I have any common factors here? No. So I'm going to go ahead and do my grouping. There's my first group. And then again, I'm sliding that parentheses in. I cannot emphasize enough. We've got to change that sign. Because if I don't, I've changed the sign of the number. Now it's the same expression. When I clear parentheses, I get back my original expression. But now what do I need to do? So let's go ahead and pull out any common factors. So nothing numerical. 2 and 3 don't share any factors. But I can pull out an x squared. Then what am I left with in that group? 3x minus 2. How about in this next group? I can pull out a 3. And what am I left with? 3x minus 2. And notice, we have this nice common factor here. Again, if I don't have that common factor, either I made a mistake, if I'm off by sign, it's worth that second look. Make sure I didn't mess it up. Or I can't factor it by grouping. Okay, with that said, I can pull out my 3x minus 2. And then what am I left with? I'm left with x squared minus 3. And I'll leave it up to you to check that. You can FOIL that back out, and we should get our original expression. Okay. Try to do this one on your own. So pause the video here. I know I say that a lot, but it's worth doing. Pause the video here and see if you can do this one by grouping. This one comes out a little bit easier because everything's positive. Slide my parentheses in. And now what can I do? Look in the first group. What's common in both of those? Well, a squared. And then what do I have left? A plus 2 plus. And then what do I have left in this next one? Again, make sure you bring that plus sign down. I can pull out a 3. And I get a plus 2. Here's my common factor, a plus 2. Pull that out. A plus 2. And what am I left with? A squared plus 3. Okay. Very similar. How about this one here? x cubed plus 2x squared plus x plus 5. Yeah, let's go ahead and pop a parentheses right in here. I don't have to worry about my signs, which is nice. But what is in this first term I can pull out? Good. X squared. And what am I left with? X plus 2. Plus, I can't pull out anything from that one, so that's just an x plus 5. And what do we notice here? Well, I have an x plus 2, and then I have an x plus 5. Those are different. Those are not the same factor, so I can't factor that out. So this one cannot be factored in this way. So this one, remember, we can't factor it. We call it prime.